Hello, it's me, and I have a emergency special request. This is a kind of a rare and unusual thing that service I perform every so often when someone has come to me with a immediate and emergency request on how to solve or walk through a certain puzzle. So I'm going to do that, and if someone has a similar type of an emergency request, let me know. Besides, it gives me an excuse to play with my 2x2x4. So that was what the emergency request was, believe it or not, as to how to solve this. Now, the particular viewer said that that she could solve it, actually was able to do it, but didn't quite have a good understanding of exactly what was going on. And as I was reviewing it, realized that, yeah, there's a little bit of a trickiness to this. And it has to do with the fact that there's only corners, no edges. Well, the way that you solve this is you do it by way of pretty much trying to do it by domino solves, by swapping one corner from another, by doing top to bottom corner swaps and adjacent corner swaps. So when confronting a puzzle, what I like to do first is I like to go through and categorize what kind of a puzzle this is. So this is a 2x2x4, which means that it's a shapeshifter. It's of the form of n by n plus p by n plus p, where p is any even number, which means it shapeshifts. So I can turn it 90 degrees in any direction and get a shapeshifter. Now what I'm going to do to really demonstrate how to solve this is I'm actually going to utilize the simplest version of a edge of a corner only puzzle, which is the 2x2. And I'm also going to roll that into the next level up, which is a 2x2x3. This represents three different types of puzzles. This, of course, represents your classic cube. This represents an n by n plus o by n plus o, where o is any odd number. So this represents a domino, and this represents a shapeshifter. But ultimately, the overall strategy that you're going to try to reduce this down to is pretty much the same. So to go through the algorithms and to show you how you start off with a classic cube type puzzle and then go up to one layer from a 2x2x2 to a 2x2x3 to a 2x2x4. It's going to be illustrative so that you can understand what's going on in the strategies by starting off with a 2x2 solve. Now, I'm not going to do this in a speed cubing way. I'm only doing this to demonstrate the solve with this. So I'm actually going to do a domino solve of a 2x2. So just to show the algorithms, to show how we apply it to the incremental puzzles here, so that I can provide the viewer with what they're seeking, a deeper understanding of what the heck's going on. So we're going to start off, do a quick scramble here, and there you go, there you go. Okay, doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do to start off with, when I'm doing a 2x2 solve, is we put in one side fairly intuitively by doing moves like turn, 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 doing RI, DI, RDs. It's easy enough to do, but you can just kind of do it by positioning. So let's say we were to try to get our green side first, and here's the green and purple and yellow. And again, I'm assuming very little actual knowledge, behind the scenes knowledge of how to solve this. So you can see that here's a green and yellow here. I want to move this to here. Simply move it under where you want to move it to, and just keep doing RI, DI, RDs until you eventually get it there, and there it is. To do the other one, this is already in. Find the other green, which is here. It's right under where it needs to be. So if I just keep RIDIing it, I'll eventually get it where I want it to be. So there it is. We have the first side over here. So that's done just with RIDIRDs. Tip it upside down. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing one algorithm and one algorithm only. And that's going to be corner swaps. Now these are all corners. An edge is something that's in between two corners. Being a 2x2, it ain't got none, so there isn't any of that. But let's find one where at least one lines up, and that's going to be, say, this one over here. So right next to this is going to have to be the white and red. Well, this is the white and red, so this is actually where it's supposed to be. No problem. How about this? Well, this is supposed to be white and red and orange, red and yellow, and we have the red and yellow here. So what I want to do without messing these two up is I want to cause a permutation. A permutation is where I'm basically translating one piece to another area. So I need to move this to here because this is yellow and red to line up with this, and this to here because this is purple and blue to line up with this. Actually, it'll be the yellow and purple, which will line up with these guys over here. So this is the one and only algorithm that you're going to need to know in order to help solve the rest. which is a corner swap. Now I've gone through this with different tutorials, but assuming no knowledge of that, that's what we're going to do. And again, the process of what I'm doing is called permutation. Permutation is where I'm taking one little cubey and putting it at another place with various swaps. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and that algorithm is 2R U, 2R UI, 2R. Then the top one turns with a UI, and the bottom one turns with a D. I could have just turned the whole puzzle, but that's okay. And then do 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. And then what you're going to have to do is take the bottom, just to orient things back, and do a DI. So what you're going to see is this is in place. This is actually in place, it's just not oriented correctly. But you can see this is red, white, and blue to coincide with this, and this is blue is going to be on top, so you can see this red and yellow is where it needs to be. This is also where it needs to be, it's just that it needs to be turned. So then we're just going to do the same algorithm that we did initially, RIDI, RDs, and then just keep orbiting around until all these are in place. RIDI, RD, RIDI, RD, D, RIDI, RD. Make sure you do that last D. So this is where it needs to be. Now without moving this bottom part, move this in place. Same thing, RIDI, RDs until this is up, and this will magically be fine. And you can see that it's okay. So that is a domino solve of a 2x2. How do I translate that if I lifted up one and put a little middle membrane in between? Now again, because this is n by n plus O by n plus O, this is a domino, a pure domino, non-shapeshifter, so this scrambles pretty much doing 180-degree turns on this axis and this axis, but 90-degree turns on this axis here. So how would I translate that? Okay, that's a pretty good scramble. So the concept of this is a little different in that these two layers here can only mix with each other. So I can't start off the way that I started off with this. I have to add a component to this that I didn't do here. When you have one layer that only mixes from the top to the bottom, then I start to do corner swaps. So we showed you how to do like a corner switch, which was a permutation thing. This is going to be a swap from one layer to the next. And as you're doing dominoes, as you're doing cuboids basically, that's really the concept of what you're doing, is you're just swapping one layer for another. This layer is complementary to this layer, and it'll always be that way. This didn't have complementary layers per se, because it was more jumbled up, but this one does, and most of your cuboids do. So the first step that you want to do in a situation like this is ultimately, no matter how big your tower is you want to get your middle layer over here. Now if you're not in a cuboid form, you got to get it to a cuboid form. And once you do that, you get your middle area. The thing about the middle areas is they only scramble with each other. So this layer cannot scramble with any other layers. So all of these just have to be positioned. So I see the yellow here. Here's the yellow over here. So if I wanted to move this to here, I'm simply moving it very intuitively like so. So this is in here, here, here. Believe me, you're only going to find a couple of moves before that's in. Now that you have your middle membrane in, so to speak, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing your complementary swaps of corners. There's no edges to deal with this. So in the domino solve, once you've placed your middle membrane here, you're going to be going up above and you're going to be placing things into this layer from the top layer here. With each move that you do, you're going to create placement parity, so to speak. It's actually more of a placement issue, where with every time I do the algorithm, I'm going to take these two and swap them with each other, then they'll swap back when I apply it again. So the question now is, what is the color on the bottom? Is it brown or is it gray? What is that, brown, black? I don't know. Well, what you could do is you could take these colors here and see what matches up here. As you can see, the brown one doesn't match up. This is the this is orange, and this is yellow, and this is green. It's the opposite here. So I know that it's not this color, it's this color. And as you can see, when I line it up here, these colors line up just fine. And this lines up as well. So what I want to do is I want to move all of these down to here. And that simple algorithm to do that is I'm going to move this in place. This is going to come down to here. How do I know it's right? Well, what's going to have to happen with this is when this is moved down, this is going to flip. So this yellow is going to end up here, and this blue is going to end up here. Do I know that this is supposed to be a blue side? Sure, because this will tell me. So this yellow and blue lines up with this center over here. This will be brought down to here. And that algorithm is 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. That does bring it down here. Now, as promised, I do have a flipped issue here. These two got flipped. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it in this position where the flipped areas are still right in front of me and to the right. Then I move to the next portion that has to be put in, and that's up here. Move this just above where it's got to be, and this red and blue is going to come down here to coincide with this blue and red over here, and this algorithm will flip this back. 2R U, 2R UI, 2R. Puts this back, and now we have our bottom layer. So bottom layer here. Now the thing about the 2x2 is once you've done that, if you end up with a situation where this is all in, you're good, because there's nothing that I'm going to do with this top layer that's going to end up bringing this out. No more flipping or placement issues here. So now that I have everything in the bottom layer and placed, I've got everything I need in the top layer. Notice there's not going to be any issues with orientation, just permutation. It's a matter of swapping these out. So what I'm going to do is I find one that's in, and I'm going to see what goes next to this. Green and yellow. That's way over here. So I'm going to do a series of corner swaps to get it here. So I'm going to start off over here and swap these two to get this to here. Then I'm going to swap it to here, if that makes sense. So I need this green and yellow to be here. So it makes sense that I swap it here, and then from here I swap it here. And that algorithm is the same, but I'm going to be juxtaposing this layer with this layer. So 2R U, 2R UI, 2R. Now this turns to a UI, and this turns with a D. Then 2R UI, 2R U, 2R. And this turns back with a DI. Now notice this did not create placement issues. This algorithm does not, but it did put this one over to here. Now all I've got to do is flip these two so that this guy can be right next to this. So same thing. 2R U, 2R UI, 2R, UI D, 2R UI, 2R U, 2R, then D, and it places that back. So those are basically all the algorithms that you need to know. Place your middle layer, and then you can do your top to bottom corner swaps, and then you can do your same layer corner switches over there. Now occasionally you might get a situation like this. Okay, where you see that you have placement issues here. That's going to happen if while you're putting in the bottom layer, you ended up with a situation where you still had placement issues that were out. When that happens, no algorithm that I'm going to do on the top to swap corners here is going to put this in. So when you have this in a 1x1 by a 2x2 by 3, you do our swapping algorithm here, our parity placement algorithm, in order to place this within 180 degrees from each other. So flip these two. And that's where you hold it to the side here. And if it's odd layer, like this one is, then you have one to the left, one to the right. Go to U, to R, to F, and then to U, then to F, to R, to U, to F, and you've got it. And that's how you do it. So now when we build up yet another layer, as we've gone from a 2x2x2 to 2x2x3, how do we apply this strategy to the 2x2x4? So there's no difference. You know all the algorithms. It's just a question of perspective. And even the plan is exactly the same. I recently lubricated this because this is generally a very stiff puzzle, and I'm pretty happy with how loose it is now. Actually, it really loves to turn, more so than I thought. So this one not only does 180-degree turns and moves the same way that this one does, but because we have ourselves a shapeshifter, what it's also going to do is it's going to move 90-degree turns as well. So we might as well start doing that, where this can move here, and now we can start moving it like so. And it actually moves pretty smoothly for a 2x2x4. So by doing this, we're taking it out of the cuboid form. Okay, so this really gets to the question that the viewer had: how do I solve this? And although she knew how to solve it, the question is, why does it work? How can I understand it? How can I understand the strategy? Well, good question. So here's what I would do. when you have a situation like this, and you can see this is a very different kind of a puzzle. It doesn't even resemble this at this point when it's scrambled form, but the strategy is going to be the same. The strategy is I want to get my middle membranes, but I can't do anything like this because in the shape-shifted form, we have bandaged areas. So in other words, I cannot access this. So the first step that you want to do in this particular puzzle is you want to get it back to the cuboid form. Now, it doesn't really matter if you get it in a cuboid form with the top edge solved and the bottom edge solved. Doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go through the simplest way of doing this. The simplest way of doing this is let's go ahead and put in, say, the blue layer over here. And you can do that by way of doing RIDIRD. So here's blue, and we can match it up if we want because it's easy enough to do that. It's done the same way. When you have a shapeshifter, start solving it like a cube to get it back to the cuboid form. And you're going to see that that's exactly what I'm going to do. Here's another blue over here. I can actually just move that up, but let's say I wanted to make it more complicated. Blue and red, this will move up over here, so put this here, put this right below it, and just keep going because this is blue and red, RIDIRD, so we're good. Now I've got this one, put this right below where it's got to be, RIDIRD, RIDIRD. Now to those who already know how to solve this, again, I'm not trying to do the fastest solve, I'm trying to answer a question. So you see this over here. The next step is I'm going to go ahead and do this top layer the same way that I did over here. And all I want to do right now is, knowing that this is white, I'm going to pretend like it was here where all the whites are kind of, where they need to be here. I'm going to ignore these layers here and ignore these layers. And I'm going to try to do the process of permutating. In other words, I just want these to be where they're supposed to be. Now, here's the crux of this. I don't have to do that. With the strategy that I'm using, I don't have to put this where they quote have to be. In other words, if this needs to be the green and red and white area, this could be over here. If this is over here, then you'd be looking for the white, red, and yellow, which happens to be here. So these are actually where they're supposed to be. This over here is where it's supposed to be as well, because this is yellow and green. This is orange and green rather. This is orange and green. We ignore these. We're defining it based upon just the terminal segment over here, and this is where it needs to be. But I'll tell you, it really doesn't matter. If it was like this, it doesn't matter either. My goal right now is to get it to the cuboid form. So you can solve it like this if you want, but it doesn't matter. To get this in, we do our RIDIRD algorithm just to flip this up. So now that we've got it permutated, we need to orient it. So RIDIRD, and I know I'm done when the white is on the top. RIDI, right here. Move the next one over. RIDIRD, RIDIRD. That's good. Move this over here to a UI. RIDIRD, RIDIRD. We've got one more. And again, cuboids are not speed solving things, but based on this algorithm, you will get it to the cuboid form. Now, what was my goal with that? It just so happened that I've got this bottom one and I've got this top one, and it's all coordinated over here. But that was not my goal, nor should it be yours. If you want to do this fast. If you want to do this efficiently. My next step is I'm shifting to this modality, and what I want to do is I want to get the center. But unlike this guy, where there's just one center and all I had to do was a couple of turns to get it in because it's in the same layer, this center consists of two middle areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to divide it into two of these, two complementary layers here. So these two are complementary, and then these two are complementary. Just like here, these two are complementary, and this was its own complement. I have to put these two in the way I put these two in. So in other words, I'm going to be doing corner swaps. So I see that this is green and red, so I'm looking for the next one, which is going to be red, and the color opposite green, which is yellow. So which one? Is it this one, or is it this one? I see two. Well, it's not this one, because when I move this down, this is going going to flip. So the yellow is actually going to be here. So this belongs up here. Turn it over here, and these guys are now going to, this is going to flip appropriately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move, this is 1, and this is 1, and go 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, so that's in. So now we move on. Now understand, I'm ignoring the tops and bottoms. It served its purpose, and I'll get back to that later. So now we have yellow and orange. So this is already in place. Yellow and orange, I move over here. I need the orange and green, orange and green. So find it over here. Here's the orange and green. We're going to move this down with the corner swap over here. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. And what you see is we have this bottom layer here. Now we do this top portion over here. Again, we're getting both of these to become collectively our center. You see this is in place and this is in place, which means these guys need to swap. So this green and orange needs to come over to here with this green and orange. Now this can be in any configuration, but I do it exactly the same way I did when I was trying to match the top layer once I got the bottom layer. So this is bottom, now I do the top. So what I'm going to do is a corner swap with exactly the same algorithm. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. Turn the whole puzzle here, because that's like going UI and then D, it's like turning the puzzle. Then 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R, and then do a DI back, and you see we have our middle membrane. So now we've reduced it to this guy. So we have a series of reductions. Both of these together are made up of this. What about the top and bottom? We know how to do that. It's the same as this. So which is which is white and which is blue? Well, I think the blue one's supposed to be down here because that matches with the center. So we're going to keep that over here, and I'm going to put the next blue one in. In this case, it's going to be the blue that is red and yellow. Do I have that? Right over here. Blue, yellow, and red. Move it over here and do that swap. Now understand what's going to happen is that these two layers collectively, both of these are going to be swapped. They're going to have placement issues. 2R, U, just the top, 2R, UI, 2R. So now that's moved down here. We did cause placement issues here, so we continue to hold this in front of us. Move on to the next one, which is here, and I see the blue one over here, so this one is going to move into here. This is the green and orange, that'll move here. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, and we're good. We can move this in, so now we have these layers in here. Same thing here, this just takes one corner swap now. These two are lined up here, and I need to swap these. Now this could have been here, this could have been here, so it's just a question of corner swaps from the top. So this yellow and red will come over here, and that's going to be 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. Now in this case it's just the tops and bottoms. This middle is held constant. So this top UI, D, 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R, this moves back, and you've got it solved. Now just like we could have had a placement parity issue here, we could have a very similar situation with this. So this will happen when you are putting these in, and it just so happens that when you did your swap from here to here, you ended up with placement over here that was out. And there's no algorithm that I'm gonna do on the top that's gonna place this back. So you end up placing this, these two are still out, and then you end up placing this, but we have to deal with this. The algorithm is very similar to this, but there's an even layered variation of this when you have two that are out in an even layer as opposed to an odd layer. Start out the same, hold it over here, and then go to U, and where you're going to split it is one U is going to be splitting in the middle, right in between both parity issues, and the other U is going to be splitting just above where the placement issue is as well. So that's going to be 2U splitting here, 2U, 2R, 2F. Then we have to do two 2U's. One is we split here again, 2U. Then we split just above where the placement issue was, so 2U again. Then finish it up with a 2F, 2R, 2U, and you've solved your 2x2x4. So I hope that clarified it. It's actually a fairly simple solve, but I went into some detail because the viewer requested a further understanding of exactly what was happening, which you get with these specific types of corner only puzzles is you don't have middle placement issues. Middle placement issues can cause a whole mess of different kinds of placement issues and whatnot, especially when doing the odd number placement algorithm to bring it back. You end up having middle areas that are all messed up that we can discuss at some future point. So hope that helps to solve your 2x2x4, and that is your quickie viewer emergency request. Thanks for watching.